Welcome to Chat Tsunami. Hello everyone and welcome to Chat Tsunami. I'm Tsunami and joining me today are two very good friends. You might have heard their voices before, Adam and Craig. Hello there, welcome.
Howdy.
Hi there, thanks for having me back again.
No problem, thanks for coming back, even though the check's bounced.
Wait, the check bounced?
Oh shit.
I told you I'd give you 3 strikes and then
Oh wait, hold on. Let me end the stream, guys. Then let's come. No. Cut. Right, let's start again. Yeah, let's start again. Hello everyone, welcome to the 5th episode of Chat Tsunami. I'm kidding. So yeah, today we are blasting all the way back to the past, and we are going to be talking about quite a nostalgic topic this time around. We are going to be talking about our experiences with childhood games, which I have to admit I've been pretty hyped to do this one.
yeah, it was a fun topic.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what we come up with anyway. So yeah, before we get into kind of the meat of the subject and kind of sharing some of the games that shaped our gaming tastes, first of all, I've got a question that is going to be directed to both of you, and then we'll kind of jump into some of the games that that were quite influential to us growing up. So the first question is, how could you define what makes a good childhood game? Because I don't know about you guys, but I remember when I was younger, like playing like loads of games when I was kind of growing up, but there was only like a certain amount that kind of stuck with me. Whereas you see other games that kind of pop up and they'll go, you'll kind of see them in passing and go, oh yeah, that was a thing. So Craig, first of all, what makes a good childhood video game, do you think?
Yeah, it's a pretty tough question. I think for me, I'm going to have kind of relate this to films, but I think that it's the Pixar effect for me. Mm-hmm. See if a game is really good and you played as a kid, it's typically going to be a good game for your childhood. Well, I think games that are made for kids are usually, if they're not great games already, if you know what I mean, they're not going to be great games for kids regardless of how aimed at kids they are. If that's kind of a long roundabout way of saying that, but the same way like the Toy Story films, for example, incredible films, and also they appeal to kids. And I feel like a lot of childhood games are the same. Like the Mario 64 is probably a good example. Like it was loved by adults and kids alike, and makes it a great childhood game. Well, a game that was just made for kids, like say, I don't know, some 10-minute made movie tie-in game for a kids film. Or one of those mascot platformers that were pumped out, not like one of the main guys, but one of like, I'm going to like say like Gecko or TY or something, because someone's going to try hunt me down for saying that. But like those games, like they don't really, they make you enjoy you when you're a kid, but it's those memories you take away with are really special games.
The other one I was thinking there when you said 3D platformers was Bubsy 3D, which... See, I had never heard of it until I think it was someone on YouTube had brought it up, and they were like saying, oh, this was a terrible game and everything, and I think that kind of shows how much of an impact it made on me, especially, because, I never heard of it before that, and it was like, oh, and then apparently it's getting like a remake or something, and again, it's like, I've got no investment in it, and again, that shows like how, I suppose, successful or influential it was. But yeah, the same question to you too as well, Adam. What do you think? What would you say makes a good childhood game?
No, it's a really good question, and again, a really difficult one. I think Craig hit all the major points there. I tried to look at it kind of from my perspective, and I tried to think what kind of drew me to games when I was a kid. Getting into gaming, and I came up with kind of four kind of principles that I thought about. So I thought like simplicity, replayability, being engaging, and then familiar. So I do think there has to be, for a successful childhood game, I think it has to be relatively simple, and that it has to be kind of easy to get into. I think certainly for me, like I wasn't going to be spending my time on a lot of games that like required you to put like lots of hours into kind of get good at. So you want that kind of simplicity as well. When I was a kid, like I would often replay a lot of games, so it wasn't always getting back that many. Kind of wait for parents to get you something at Christmas or a birthday or something like that. So you're going to be spending a lot of time with like probably a small selection of games. So you want games that are replayable and that keep you engaged, and then being engaging as well, like bringing you in, really drawing your attention, pulling you into the world and everything. And then with Familiar, I was thinking about it, and for me as a kid, I was drawn to games. I was drawn to a lot of games from kind of movies or like TV shows that I really liked. So I was a big Lord of the Rings fan, so I'd always get Lord of the Rings games. Same with Batman, things like that. But then as well, if I saw games that kind of reminded me of those things, so I actually played like quite a few fantasy games because I really like Lord of the Rings, and I was like, oh, that kind of looks Lord of the Rings-esque. So go into that, and I picked up Shenmue 2. Like, I can't remember how old I was, maybe like 10 or 11 or something, because it looked like a Jackie Chan martial arts film. Yeah, and I loved those when I was a kid. So, like, it was that familiarity I thought that really drew me as a kid. I don't know if maybe anybody else had that experience, but those sort of four things that I thought that make a good kind of childhood game.
Yeah, no, that is a good point as well. We'll kind of get into like specific games like later on in the podcast, but it's like if you play like a really good platformer, and then you see like other games that are doing a very similar thing that have got like when you're a kid and you see them, they've got like really bright characters, and it's like what you're saying, Adam. It's like there's that kind of familiarity and that kind of like, because you kind of gravitate to things that are very familiar and similar, especially at that age when you're gaming, because you're kind of like finding your feet at that age, like kind of trying different games out. But the more games that you're enjoying, I suppose, in like a certain genre, the more you kind of gravitate towards. At least like then, I remember I did that quite a lot, especially with platformers. But yeah, no, those are very good points. And I would definitely agree with both of you. I think definitely that familiarity with a gaming series, and especially what you were saying, Craig, about the kind of appealing to all ages, because I think that's quite an issue with a lot of games at the time, where, and I think it's probably like a perception back then when we were growing up, when gaming was, it wasn't really, and correct me if I'm wrong guys, but it wasn't really like what it is nowadays, was it?
Oh no way! I remember when I was a kid, I wanted to be a computer games developer. I got pretty close, if anyone's wondering. But
man,
there was no industry at all. There was a small company called Rockstar. Had a couple of games based out of Dundee. But like there was no industry, and like nowadays, if you want a job in the gaming industry, it's such a huge industry now. You can get one. It's pretty incredible how big it is compared to back then.
Yeah.
It's actually, it reminds me of, I don't know if you've seen that comic. It's a Pretty Boomer comic. I'm just like throwing that out there. But it's one of those ones where it's like, it's a child playing it's like the Super Nintendo, I think he's playing. And his mum and dad are like reading in the newspaper. And there's all these like adverts like circled, like top gamer wanted and things like that, and top game, like player and all of this to beat Mario, like very tongue-in-cheek at the time, as if, gaming couldn't be a career, and and of course
wrong they were.
Oh, how very wrong. I don't think many people probably would have expected like how much it would have blown up since like the 90s to what it is now, because it actually surprises me. Like, I mean, some of the games were probably before our time, but a lot of the games that are like very kind of pixel based, like as you were saying, Craig, very throwaway games. Like, I remember my brother used to have the McDonald's game, which, trust me, does exist. And that's just like it's like a 2D side scroller, and it's like those kind of games. Like, I don't remember anything about it other than the fact it exists. I mean, don't get me wrong, you still get games that are kind of throwaway games nowadays, but like I think especially back then it was more common, whereas nowadays... Oh, sorry.
You used to get games in your cereal.
Oh god, that is true. Actually, I do remember that. What, the big disc, and you're like, what's it gonna be? Well, I think I would have preferred the Beyblade cover. I actually do remember that, like at the time, there was a lot of cereals. It was either like a toss-up between, I think it was like a Disney disc, like for a Disney game based on like one of the films that were out at the time. I think it was like Treasure Planet was the one. Or like the other cereals were doing like Beyblade covers. So it was like, good times. Sorry,
a simpler time.
It really was. So before we get into like kind of specific games, just out of curiosity, how did you both get into gaming?
Well, I actually can't go too much into that question without spoiling my first choice of game. But I'll briefly give an overview. I started playing on my parents' Sega Mega Drive, which was my first console, and that was like the first Sonic the Hedgehog, and a game, I think EA's first ever game called Desert Storm, and they're both pretty bad games. Sorry, people that like Sonic, but I was never really into games. I enjoyed playing them, but I was never like, I wasn't what I would become. And then many years later, we got a PlayStation 1, and I was just kind of starting to get into games, and then I picked up a certain game, and that changed the direction of my life, basically.
Wow.
But I'll wait my turn on that one. That's all I have to say so far on how I got into my gaming.
Yeah, okay. Adam, what about you?
Yeah, so well, I never got I didn't get a video game console until the original Xbox, 2001. So my biggest exposure before that time to video games was friends who had like PlayStations or Nintendo 64s. So like kind of going around to friends' houses and stuff and playing games there. And I really always enjoyed loved like going around playing stuff there, and always kind of wanted to get one. But like for a long time, I kind of had to rely on like older PC games because my parents were notoriously bad at like updating both computers and operating software. So I was always several years behind the trend. And there's another series again. I won't spoil because it's one of the games I picked, but a certain series of games kind of helped propel me into gaming as well. But yeah, it was through friends, and that really kind of sparked my kind of interest and really wanting to play more games and stuff. And then once I got an Xbox, it just got out of control and got out of hand from there.
Which brings you here today.
Exactly.
I mean, for me, I suppose, like, because I've got two older brothers, they were really into the Mega Drive and it was the NES, and then it was almost that kind of divide. So one of my brothers had like the Sega consoles, and then my other brother had the Nintendo consoles. So it was kind of getting exposed to like both of those sides. And again, like the same, without kind of going too deep into like specific games, it was kind of like following them. But I have to admit, see, other than playing games with them, like I always remember I was always like kind of an outsider almost. Like sometimes I would play games like on the N64, I would play something like Diddy Kong Racing. I don't know if you guys have ever played that.
Afraid not, so like, gap in my...
It's a very stress-inducing game. It's like Proto Mario Kart. I think it actually came out at the same time, but it was just very stress-inducing, especially because I always remember playing my brother at it, and I was about to win, and then somehow the console reset itself, and by that I mean...
Somehow?
Yeah, somehow, and by that I mean my brother stretched over and pressed the button with his foot, so yeah, right as I was about to cross that finish line, bam, the console went off, and he's like, oh, I didn't know, and it's like, you fine well knew, you It was, oh, how we chuckled. And one other one, although I don't know why this always stands out, but I just always remember that, again, like I had another brother who would play more violent games, I want to say, just because he was a lot older. And one of the games he used to play was Duke Nukem 64. Now, like, up until that point, I never heard of, like, Duke Nukem. And I remember watching it, and it's like, see if you go back and watch it and, like, look at the gameplay, it's all pixelated, it's all, like, very goofy and over the top. But back then, that was, like, cutting-edge technology. So I remember I was in the same room as my brother watching him play it, and I was just sitting there. And then my mum walked in, and she went absolutely off her head, and she was like, how could you show your brother this? This is terrible. This is so violent. And it's like, oh, how games have changed. Like, see if, my mum could see, like, the new Doom that's come out, like, years later.
Don't show her that.
I'm pretty sure that would blow, games like Duke Nukem 64 out the water. But yeah, on that note, let's just dive in. So basically, what we were kind of discussing before we came on stream was that all of us have chosen to either particular games or franchises that have been quite important to us growing up. And there's kind of like a couple of questions that we're going to really touch on for each of the games. So like, before I go on kind of asking these questions, does anybody want to go first?
Ooh, I'll go first.
Ooh.
I'll blast this.
Nice. So, yeah, no, take it away.
Right. So I have picked 2 games for my sort of childhood games. So when Fraser asked the question, what was the best games of your childhood?
Yeah.
My first question was, what's your childhood? So I was trying to,
Oh, yeah.
I was trying to debate, like,
Philosophical
what?
question first.
Yeah. Really, if any of us become adults at this point? And,
No. No.
I was trying to figure out what the cutoff point was.
Yeah.
I kind of alluded to my game earlier. So it was on the PlayStation 1. And the first game that I want to pick is Final Fantasy 8.
Ooh.
Not 7, not 9, 8. Just because I was that age where that was the first one I played. Up until that point, as I said, I was kind of into games, but even nowadays, I'm not very good at them. I don't really I'm not good at, like, you've seen me play Fall Guys. I'm not good at multiplayer games. I don't play multiplayer. I don't play online. I like single player games, and all that comes from Final Fantasy 8, I think. Like, it was the first game that I ever played where it was like, here's characters, and they have motives, and here's a story, and you want to get those characters through a story, and it's like a really mature game, especially for a kid, which is kind of weird when you think about it, but it really sparked my imagination. This like high fantasy setting, all these different plot points and double crossing, and I actually played the game right through to the end, 100-hour game, when I was like, I think I finished it when I was about 7 or 8. Like, that's a massive undertaking. I don't think I could do it now. And this game, it basically changes my life at this point. Like, if it's not for Final Fantasy 8, I genuinely don't think I get into fantasy as a genre, or I don't get into RPG games. I don't know if I play games after. I genuinely don't know if I play games after the PS1, because I just wasn't that into them. And I was kind of like, and even now, the games that I'm into are these cinematic, story-driven RPGs, and I think a lot of that has to do with Final Fantasy 8, and I think that's had a massive influence. And even things like outside of gaming, like Dungeons and Dragons. Again, you can basically trace that whole why you're interested in Dungeons and Dragons back to I play Final Fantasy. So that's my first choice, because I think that's like such a big deal to me, that game. And I actually went back and played it last year. Not till I started this year. God, time's a flat circle now. I went back and played it on the Switch. I got the Final Fantasy 8 remastered on the Switch. Tell you what, lads, this game is not aged well. I hated it. I hated it. I had a terrible time with it. I got to what would be disc 3 or 4 on the actual PlayStation. Thankfully, the Switch doesn't make you unplug the cartridge or whatever.
Well, that would be a nightmare.
It'd be incredible, wouldn't it?
4 cartridge edition.
Oh my god!
And they all taste so good.
Oh,
Kids don't let you switch cartridges.
Yeah, PSA of the day: don't let your Switch or your Switch cartridges or any parts.
No, like your Switch. That's fine. Just don't like the cartridge.
You should have told me this before I started this podcast.
Adam's sitting there with like.
That's what I've been doing while I'm listening to you guys talk.
Yeah, Adam hasn't had his dinner yet. It's just it's just a quick snack.
This is to keep me going.
Yeah. Don't we all?
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
Anyway, I played that game. I must admit, I didn't actually enjoy it, and I only got I got to about 3/4 of the way through and went, you know what? I've had my fill. Thanks for the memories, and I passed up the game and put it away, and that was it. My other game, I wanted to kind of talk about the duality of my gaming.
Oh no!
I think the duality of gaming in general. On the one hand, you've got these super deep, intense plots and cinematics and incredible games that are all story driven, and on the other hand, you've got games that are so simple it could not be simpler, that just strike that great balance of how fun they are. Obviously, you guys have played Overcooked on the stream. That's a prime example of that kind of game where it's just like the concept couldn't be simpler, and I love those kind of games. And I think the reason I love those games so much is the Guitar Hero franchise, specifically Guitar Hero 1. I'll pick out on the PS2. So when that game came out, I was so deep into RPGs. That was all I was playing. I would like spend hundreds of hours on each game. And then Guitar Hero comes out, my brother gets it. It's another one where like my game taste take another hard right shift. So I still like these RPGs, but these like rhythm games and these simple games that become like kind of staple of indie gaming going forward from Guitar Hero, like become such a huge thing for me. And I became a metalhead. outside of gaming. So I don't know if that would just entirely into Guitar Hero. You know, some of the songs on it had Ace of Spades was on it. The I Love Rock and Roll by Joan Jett and the Blackhearts. Iron Man by Black Sabbath. It like basically changes my music taste from like being like, you know, when you're a kid, you don't really have a music taste, do you? It's just kind of whatever. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, hold on. I like this metal stuff. I like this guitars and crashing drums and making my parents uncomfortable. I love it.
It's not a phase, Mom.
It's not a phase, Mom. I got my
metal now.
Yeah.
I got my Spotify 2020 results, and turns out it was a phase. I'm really into K-pop now. But
aren't we?
Sorry, Mom, you're right. It was a phase.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to pick Guitar Hero as another one because I feel like the first one doesn't get a lot of love as well, because Guitar Hero 3 is like the seminal version of the game, and then Rock Band comes out, and then the genre kills itself. I feel like Guitar Hero 1 is a fantastic game and does fantastic songs, and I think it starts that for me, this next level of gaming where I'm like, actually, hold on, simple games are also really good, but you can pull a game right back to the bare bones. Guitar Hero was a game with 5 buttons, and it was one of the best experiences I had, and it had an amazing multiplayer. And yeah, I just wanted to basically harp on about how great that was, and couch co-op, make sure there's more of that in your life.
Yes. No, I'd agree with that, especially for streaming purposes. Co-op games are the way of the future. So, yeah, just some kind of follow-up questions. So you kind of touched on that before when you were talking about Final Fantasy, like how you came across it. But what about Guitar Hero? Like, what was the moment, like, you kind of, like, you saw it and you got into it?
I think my brother had it, and my brother bought it, and I must have just walked in him playing it. And I was just like, wait, what is this? Why is there a guitar? Like, you know, that was, I think that must have been that. I can't remember the exact moment, but that visually striking guitar, you know, from either the PS2 where there was no peripherals really, and I think that was probably the thing that probably grabbed my attention first. Like, why is it so loud as well? If you remember that guitar went ga-dung every time you played it. So basically, I remember watching my brother play it. I was like, I need to play this, and he wouldn't let me. While he was playing, obviously.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it wasn't until he was out that I got a shot of it. And, not gonna lie, but I smashed the high scores, just saying. But you know,
as you do. Yeah.
We only had one memory card. I had to overwrite a save. That was the only way of doing it.
Oh.
So
risky.
That is risky business there.
That's what I'm known for, mate. That's what I'm known for.
Well, just breaking into people's houses and then just overwriting the Guitar Hero scores.
That's why I lock mine up at night in the safe. Just in case.
Breaking into your house and breaking your high scores. I'm getting a t-shirt.
Oh my god. Yeah, moving on. Before
Craig admits to any more crimes.
Before anyone that chats Tsunami is incriminated, and can I just say I am not associated with any of these guys and their breaking and entering ways. So yeah, you kind of touched on this as well, but I've got 2 more kind of questions that are kind of linked together. So for both of these games, first of all, why is each game important to you? And then following on from that, what are your feelings just now about them? Like, are you still a fan? Do you think they've not held up? I know you kind of briefly touched on that with Final Fantasy, that it didn't really hold up.
So I think, I kind of mentioned the Final Fantasy 8 basically changed the direction of gaming for me, and to this day I still play RPGs, and I think a lot of that's to do with the Final Fantasy 8 and then Guitar Hero again. I think that was maybe not the gateway to it, but certainly the opening of this kind of like multiplayer, simple indie games, like being a big part of my life. Maybe, you know, and you can't tell the future, obviously, that maybe I would have got into these genres of game without these things, but these were definitely the gateways for me. And in terms of holding up, I think I was a wee bit harsh in Final Fantasy 8 because obviously the game came out the first time in 1997. That's a lie. It was developed in 1997. So, you know, obviously games have changed a lot since then. And 2 years ago, 1999 it came out. I think last year or the year before, I played Persona 5. And if anyone's played that, and I know you're waiting to play it, so that's not me, just not.
Oh, yeah.
No, it's on the backlog.
It really is on the backlog. It's looking at me right now.
Play me. Then it's one of the greatest games ever made, as far as I'm concerned. And it does a lot of the stuff that Final Fantasy 8 was trying to do back in the PS1. And maybe if it had came out today, it would have been as good, and I would have, like, maybe if they did, instead of doing the remake, for Final Fantasy 7, they did it for Final Fantasy 8, maybe I would have fallen in love with it. but going back and playing it was quite difficult. But in general, I don't like going back to play games from our childhood games. I think personally, I find that like the SNES before, like the SNES and that kind of era, those games age really, really well. They age like a fine wine. And games from like the PS3, end of the PS2 to like now, have all aged really well. And I feel like the PS1, early PS2 era, a lot of those games don't age well. They're really experimental and they're really difficult to play because of the 3D. They haven't quite got to grips with it. And I feel like those games get a lot worse a lot quicker. Apologies if someone's favourite game out there is like Crash Bandicoot on the PS1 or something, but those games age so much harsher than other games just because of when they came out and what nobody really knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
And I think Final Fantasy VIII's victim to that, where it's like, if it was made now, you would just be able to spin the camera around to see things that you couldn't see. You know what I mean? There wouldn't be like set camera angles and stuff like that. Just simple things that just make that quality of life a lot harder. Guitar Hero, I actually haven't gone back to play the first Guitar Hero in a long, long time. Obviously, you need the peripheral, but I think I could go for a little bit of rhythm games. I haven't played a rhythm game in a while, apart from Vici and Vector. Shout out to my favourite game of 2019. But
that is true. Yeah,
that's a great game. But no, I could go playing some Guitar Hero. Obviously, once Guitar Hero, I think it was World Tour came out, and then Rock Band, whatever version that was, came out, and they both started doing DLCs, and they just kind of killed their own genre a bit. I don't think it ever picked back up again. But I'd love to play a bit of Guitar Hero now that you say that. Yeah,
it honestly reminds me a bit of The Sims, the way they went. This is going to sound like a really weird comparison, but it's like I remember, like I wasn't really a Guitar Hero person. I was more a Rock Band person, and I think that's because they had the drums at the time before Guitar Hero then jumped on the bandwagon and got the drums. So I remember, because they were relatively cheap games at the time, I ended up getting like the Beatles version. Like there was even a Lego version, and I don't know why I've got it. I don't even know what songs are on it. But it is something I'll need to actually look up. It seemed, I totally see what you mean. It's just there were so many of them just coming in. And again, same with like Sims DLC or something like that. It's like so much of it that it's kind of hard to keep up. Whereas I think nowadays, if they did something similar, I don't know if they would do it like just... I don't even know if like Rock Band or Guitar Hero are still going. Does anyone know?
They actually dropped one out last year, didn't they?
Really?
Themselves, but I think they failed quite badly.
Really? Oh my god. I actually didn't know that.
Actually, the Guitar Hero one had that weird thing where it was like, it became a first-person game. And so, like, you were like, it was all like full motion video, and you were like the guitar, and then you'd like be in front of a live crowd. Quote.
Yeah.
And you get like the girlfriend on like her boyfriend's like shoulders, like you suck, you know, like a real gig.
I saw the trailers for that, and it just stressed me out. It's like the last thing I want is real people booing me when I fuck up at a game. You know, I feel bad enough for like getting like the fake crowd boos at me. Like real bandmates making me feel bad.
It actually reminds me of I don't know if you guys have ever caught any of the streams for it. I think it's Twitch Sings, it's called.
Oh yeah.
Where it's basically like it's like a streamer chooses a song and then sings over it, but they can also duet with like other people, and it's the same idea. It's just like I can do that because I feel as if like you would get someone who'd have the voice of an angel, and then you've got me coming in going, and then it'd be like no, just absolutely no.
Oh, but Satsu, you could do Evanescence, Wake Me Up Inside, and you could do the rapping bits.
Well, as you know, I can't wake up. Save me.
Up inside.
Save me. And on that note, moving on from my failed singing career.
Save the stream.
It's alive, we gotta get in there. So yeah, moving on to Adam. Yeah, I'm laughing because I know one of the games like you're going to talk about and you're very excited about.
I'm very excited to talk about both.
Yeah,
there is one that I may have been going a bit overboard on.
So yeah,
all in good time.
Yeah, so yep. Well, the floor is yours now to kind of distract from my singing career.
No one could ever distract from that, but I'll try my best.
No, okay, please do.
That's the first.
Yeah, I was going to say this isn't even a bit now. Please save. Sorry, go on.
No. So the first game I picked was Legoland from 2000, which was on the PC. And so I kind of alluded to this when we were kind of getting going with the podcast, but I really enjoyed, like, my kind of first proper video games were a lot of the Lego video games at the time. Like there was like Lego Racers, Lego Island, Lego Rock Raiders, and they all came out before Legoland. But I really enjoyed those, and as well, like they were able to work on an old enough like operating system that I could actually play those ones. But yeah, so Legoland came out, and so I think I must have played it when I was about 8 or 9. I can't quite remember exactly. And yeah, I think my parents got it for me. And yeah, so for anybody who's not played it, it's a construction and management sim game. It's kind of very similar to something like Roller Coaster Tycoon, if anybody's played games like that. But it's the kind of theme park management games, but it's a lot more simplistic, built for like kids and stuff. It's much more simplistic mechanics. Yeah, and so you're the park manager at Legoland, and you the resident crazy scientist kind of blows the park up, and it's your job to like build it back up again and get it back to its glory days. And yeah, so like it's the first game I think that I can really remember getting really invested in. Sort of a bit like what kind of Craig was talking about. It was a game that I really wanted to see all the way through. I mean, and it's nowhere near the length of a Final Fantasy game. I'll just say that. But I really wanted to like get through the levels, and everything, and build the parks and stuff, and as the new rides unlocked. And it was one that I really enjoyed replaying as well. Even once I'd done that, I really liked to go back to it again. And yeah, I was a huge fan of Lego at the time as well. I was always getting Lego. I was always trying to get Lego at birthdays and Christmases and stuff. So it chimed really well with my interest at the time. And it really sparked a lot of my creativity. Everything, like I'd play the game, then I'd go off and make things with all various Lego sets and stuff. So yeah, it was a game that really chimed with me at a time in my life. And to give like a little hint, like I think looking back now, I think it kind of defines some of my current gaming habits. When I kind of make a link back to that. So that's a really important one for me. And then the second game I picked was Medal of Honor Frontline. From 2002, and as I was saying to both of you before we started this, a series that I think has been lost to time now. It's really been obviously it's been, I think 2013 was the last time a Medal of Honor game came out. Although there's a new VR game coming out, but really a game series that I think people forget how popular it was in the late 90s and other series I played. I played one called Rising Sun, which came out just after Frontline. And I really liked Rising Sun, and I kind of got into the series there, and I wanted to play another one. And I heard about Frontline. I think some of my friends had played it and had a lot of fun with it. So I picked it up, and yeah, I just thought it was a great game. Had so much fun with it, and it was another time in my life that it just chimed with what my interests were. I was starting to get into kind of first-person shooters. Like I played Halo by this point, and this I think was one of the other ones I played, so it really got me into that. And also I was getting really, really interested in history, especially kind of like World War II history. And so this was perfect for me. Not saying the game is a good example. You should base a history essay off the game. Please don't, because you'll fail. But but it was being a kid, you were like, oh, it's really cool, and you're landing on D-Day and everything. And it really, for me, was just hit at the exact right time where my interests were. And again, with Legoland, I think this really sparked my interest in a series of games and like a genre of games that I still love to this day and still still play and everything. So yeah, those are my two.
So you talked about how you came across it and why it was important, but the kind of the real question now is, how do you feel about it now? Would you say you're still a fan of these games, or going back to them, would you say they hold up?
Yeah, so I'll start with Legoland. I've not played Legoland in at least 15 years. And I don't even think now it would run on anything. It's not on Steam, it's not anything, and I doubt you'd have to get a pretty old computer, I think, or maybe something like Good Old Games does it or something like that. But so the chances of finding something to run it now are minuscule. And honestly, I don't think I've ever played another one of these management sim games ever. I've never played a Roller Coaster Tycoon or anything. I think this was the only example of that genre that I played. But and I think probably now as well, going back, it's probably a bit too simplistic now. I don't think it would engage me in the same way it did when I was 8 or 9. But I have a soft spot for it, and I'll always treasure the memories because I remember how much fun I had with it, and just I said how invested. I'll never forget it. I think that game is one of the first examples of me of getting gaming related stress, because there's a level where you're building a park and then aliens show up and start like nicking your rides. And this caused me profound stress because I was perfectly laying everything out, and then the aliens come in and steal all your stuff. The park inspector shows up. You get a terrible grade, and I'm like, no, it's not fair. Like, no, I had everything perfect, and the aliens came, and I absolutely got so invested and so stressed. So maybe that's not a good thing, but you know, that was that'd be the first example of that for me. I've been really drawn into a game, so it's not something I would probably go back and play, but I have like really, really fond memories of it.
It just
Oh, sorry.
So I was just going to say, it reminds me of like, you know, one of those like really bad sitcoms you used to get back in the day. It's like the aliens come down and steal it, and it's like
12 seasons in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they were jumping the shark in season 12. You know? Yeah. But yeah, sorry.
No, yeah, so going back to Medal of Honor Frontline. I still love this game as well, but I still replay this game. I still go back. I play it at least once, like every 2 years or something. I will admit, I use the invulnerability cheat now because it is damn hard, and I completed it once without any cheats. So damn it, I'm gonna have fun playing it now and not have to worry about annoying things like bar health. But like, I still love it. I still think it's such a fun game. It's a bit clunky now, you know, you compare it to like modern shooters and stuff. There's no sprinting, there's no like taking cover or anything like that. But I really love it, and like it's just so important to my developing interest, as I say, like getting me into kind of first person shooter games, but also really sparking my interest in World War II and like in history and everything, and making me go out and do research. You know, it's a subject that I still am fascinated by, and I still read about. And I've just got to say, I've got to give a shout out to the soundtrack. The soundtrack remains one of my favorite video game soundtracks of all time. I'll put it up there with anything. I think the Medal of Honor Frontline soundtrack is spectacular. I was listening to it last night when I was writing notes. I was getting all the feels. I was like, oh my god, it's still amazing. Go listen to some of it. It's absolutely great. So yeah, I still have a deep love for both games. But yeah, I will go back. I have gone back, and I will go back and keep replaying Medal of Honor Frontline because I love it. And give the series some love, everybody. Go find a Medal of Honor. It used to be great. Remember the glory days.
No, that is true. So just before I go into mine, it's just kind of going back to what you were saying there about going to, you know, when you play like a modern shooter and then you go back to like an old one, or like one you grew up playing, thinking, oh, this is just as good as, you know, the modern shooters, and then when you go back to it, you're like, yeah, no, as like, I think for me, I remember playing, I can't even remember, I think it was like either one of the Modern Warfare games, and then thinking, oh, I enjoyed that so much, let me go back and play Call of Duty 3, and then when I went back to play it, yeah, it doesn't hold up the same, that's all I'm saying. It's good enough, but it's just...
I do think you need a healthy dose of nostalgia. It's kind of what we were talking about when we talked about Halo. Like, I'll still go back and play Halo and still love it. But I think some of them you do need a bit of nostalgia to kind of shield you from
totally
more limitations. But just playing with cheats. Playing with cheats, and you don't have to worry about like bad controls, you know, and all those other things. You can just really enjoy it.
Yes.
There you go, pro tip.
Yeah, speed 100 and you'll be in Paris in no time. Yeah, I suppose for mine, so I was listening, like, before the stream when I was asking you guys, and you guys had told me, you know, I was going to choose this game or that game, and I was looking at my own list, and I was kind of thinking, oh god, mine's are going to be really basic compared to these, so fair warning. But I think the first game, definitely, and this is definitely a game that I think like a lot of people relate to as being like their very first game. So, as I said before, my brothers had like the old consoles, and as I said, like I played games before that, but I never really got into them, if you know what I mean. Like, this is my kind of gaming confession. I'm not a big fan of like the 2D sprite games, like the shooters and things. Oh, not shooters, but the like for example, 2D Sonic games, which I'll come to, but you know, and Mario and things. They're objectively good games, but they just weren't games that interested me, because if I messed up, you know, like, see back then, like, if you messed up and you couldn't save the game and then you had to start the game all over again, that was like a quick fire way for me to just go, yeah, I'm not interested in this. But like the main game that really got me into gaming was Pokemon Yellow, of all things. And just Pokemon in general, really, as a series. Because, like, when I was growing up, as I said as well, my parents they weren't overly strict, like, with what games I played, but at the same time, they were very cautious. Like, they would kind of abide by the guidelines. I don't know, were you both, like, were your parents similar for that.
My parents had a weird cut off with 15 was fine, or 16, I can't remember what the age was at the time. But 18 was a complete no-go, but I could play 15. So I ended up getting away with quite a lot of games that I probably shouldn't have.
Yeah.
So parents didn't quite understand it. I don't know why that was their cut off, but that was just it for some reason.
Yeah, see, my dad was very strict with that, but he didn't really he didn't watch me play a lot of games. I don't think he really knew all that much. My mum was a bit more lenient, so I was able to kind of put the pressure on. Be like, oh, come on, please. Yeah. But again, I kind of similar with what you're saying, Craig. 18 was the cutoff for a while, for a good while. But yeah, I at least had one parent I could put the squeeze on and get the good stuff.
The guilt tripping, please. But yeah, no, I was the same. I wasn't even allowed 15s because my parents were kind of like, oh, I don't know, because it's got this or that. So, I don't even remember. This is a weird thing, because I don't actually remember asking. Maybe I did, but I don't remember asking for Pokemon. But for anyone who, like us and anyone else who grew up, in the 90s, you'll know how big Pokemon was. It just exploded. It was everywhere. Everyone was playing it. And I remember, back then, maybe not as much now, obviously, but back then I was, a very shy child. So, I didn't really... Well, I did speak to people, but it was, quite hard. But with Pokemon, it almost felt like a way in, if you know what I mean. To be able to, to have a shared interest. So, by extension, you would have, the card game, you would have the stickers and everything. But the games were, the main draw. And... I mean, don't get me wrong, I think, other media around Pokemon kind of helped me into that. But it was the fact it was kind of a faceless character. They could just call, whatever you could call them, Satsunami or Buttface, whatever, you wanted to call your character. You could be that character. You could be your own Buttface.
Why do you want to be called Buttface? Is that what you call the rival?
We could do a podcast on this, actually.
Well, a playthrough of calling your character Buttface. Oh, God.
Analysis.
Yeah. But yeah, it's it was you were able to be that character. You were able to go out. And I have to admit, a lot of people will kind of say, oh, what was your first starter and everything? That's a very important part of it. But because I started off with Pokemon Yellow, I didn't get the choice. In Pokemon Yellow, they just give you one Pokemon, shove you out into a forest and say, go catch that creature. And then that's it. But of course, later on, I ended up kind of growing up with it. I had Pokemon Silver. I got that one Easter and I just fell in love with it. It's still one of my favourite games. And then kind of growing up, it's I fell away from it. And then that's when I started getting into FPS games. But I'm kind of similar to you guys in the sense that I knew other people who had certain games. I always remember being round at someone's house and they had I think we were still in primary school and this guy had the Hitman games. And I remember standing there and being really nervous. Because I was looking around what if a parent comes in and sees you playing Hitman? And of course their parents had let that kid get it, but because I wasn't allowed, I was kind of oh God, I'm still playing Pokemon. But in regards to how I feel about it now, kind of a mixed opinion. I think it's just any franchise, it's franchise fatigue. I'll still go back to it every so often. That was actually one of the very first streams that I did for the channel. I played, technically it wasn't the same game, it was it was Pokemon Green, it wasn't, but it's the same base game essentially. And it was a game that I had started with, I was comfortable with. And it is not a game that I'll go back to often because it's evolved so much over the years. So it's kind of I don't know. If I do go back, I kind of, as you say, Adam, you'll put in kind of cheats or stuff like that. Or or you'll just glitch it or do things like things to make it a bit more fresh, or even do challenge runs or things. But going back from playing the new games where it's so much simpler, and then looping all the way back to the old games that don't have those features, it's really hard to get back into it. And yeah, that was the first game. And the second game, which It might be a bit controversial. So initially I was debating between, first of all, Sonic or the Banjo-Kazooie series. But I don't feel as if, like, when I was younger and I had Banjo-Kazooie, like, I really enjoyed it. I love platformers. But I never completed it back in the day. I actually had to go back years later and play it through the Xbox to actually complete it. And it was like a childhood dream of, like, finishing it. And then, like, just texting people and everyone being like, what the hell are you talking about? And I'm like, I've beat Banjo-Kazooie.
On my CV, right at the top.
just writing it. Bold letters, Arial font, 15. It's... Oh, yeah. So, initially I was going to choose that, but I didn't really follow the series that well. But one series I did follow was the Sonic series, and it is kind of weird because I'm not kind of, and again this is going to sound like hashtag I'm not like the other Sonic fans, but it's kind of probably it'll be a hashtag somewhere in the world. But it's like, initially I remember my brother had the Mega Drive and he would play all the 2D games and things like that. And I could never get into it. The one game we did have that I played a lot was Sonic CD, and it was like a demo version on the PC. And I remember coming back from, I can't remember if it was like, this is going to sound like a weird memory, but it was like some New Year's Eve or New Year's Day party that I came back from as a kid. And I remember coming home and asking Mum, like, oh, can I play like a bit of that game on the PC? And I remember like loving it. But see, when I went back to play it, absolutely hate Sonic CD. And I think that's just me showing my age, because it's just too flashy, too in your face. It's like that banned episode of Pokemon. I'm just like, no, I can't do it. But like the kind of turning point for that was, I remember I was going to school one day and my brother was off for like whatever reason, and he had the Sega Dreamcast, and he was playing the original Sonic Adventure game. And I remember being like instantly hooked, because like at the very beginning you see, you know, Sonic like fighting like this boss, like just instantly they throw you into a boss battle. And I was like, as a kid, I was immediately hooked. I'm like, oh god, what's this? And of course I hear my dad in the background going, yeah, time to go. And I'm like, no, I want to see how this ends. Getting dragged out. The claw marks, I'm like, no. So eventually, like years later, I ended up playing, I think I played the first one on the GameCube, because they like re-released it when they went bust and started selling, you know, the games everywhere. So I played the first one, I played like Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, then just fell in love with them. And that was kind of like what got me into platformer games in general. And I don't know, there was just something about it that really, I mean, like Sonic nowadays is just, you know, it is like a meme at this point, as a joke, and it got worse and worse after Sonic Adventure 2. Like, it's kind of like a well-known fact that it just went downhill until it hit like rock bottom at Sonic 06 and things like that. But it almost feels as if, at least up until that point, you know, because you've got like good memories of it, it's like kind of gaming junk food, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, comfort food.
Yeah, it's like, it's something that, you know, if you're not in the mood for like, you know, winning at Warzone, you know, if you're not like wanting to like have a high stress like multiplayer game or something like that, it's something to kind of slip into and you just think, oh, I'll play that game. And it's like that kind of nostalgic burst of like, you know, I don't want to be sappy, but you know, like, oh, the good days before, you know, mortgages and things like that. But, and the music slaps as well. The music is like just over the top, like rock music and things, up until they started going for like the edgy. I mean, you remember what was it? Was it Sonic Forces? You were saying, Craig, it was the one for like the main villain.
It was whatever one had Infinite in it.
Yeah, that's
him. It was incredible. It's so good. It's like 10 years out of date. It's like a 2001 new metal song. It's brilliant.
Yeah, it's just like a grunge song.
it keeps coming up in my recommended Spotify playlist.
That's amazing.
All the time, though, because it's like, you listen to all these other bands, you should love this song. And I'm like, I kind of do, yeah.
It is a bop. In terms of, so I was asking you guys like how you felt about like your games. So both of these games, I've gone back and played them like on stream, and I'm gonna say, I think it's because they've changed so much over the years. I mean, it's probably like a perfect kind of metaphor for, you know, like growing up and things. It's like they've changed like completely from what they were, if you know what I mean. Like, I mean, it's the same, I suppose, for your guys' games as well. It's like games that kind of have to evolve with, you know, the times and things. And with Pokemon as well, Pokemon at its core is relatively the same. Like, it's still, you catch 6 monsters, you defeat a league, you know. But there's like small mechanics that just make it that bit better. So kind of going back to like Pokemon Yellow and going back to the old games is really tough because like the first generation especially is just so buggy and there's just so many glitches that you kind of think, no, I can't. It's like some of them you can exploit and you think, oh, this is great, but the ones you actually can't exploit and the ones that get you stuck in the game, you're just like, no, there's no enjoyment out of this. And I suppose it's the same as Sonic as well. As I said, like, going back, I always remember, and I don't know if you guys think of this as well, like, you always remember the best parts of games.
Oh, yeah.
Like games you enjoy, you think, oh, I love that level, I love this, and, like, especially for Sonic Adventure, like, I love the Sonic levels. I think it's, like, a really good translation of what the platforming should be like. But then you forget, like, you have to play through the game 5 more times as different characters with their own quirks, and one of which is a fishing cat called Big. If any of you guys have watched the stream or have seen it on my YouTube channel, yeah, that was like genuinely the lowest point for me in that game. Going back and playing that, because it was just so crushing. Like, this game I kept building up. I was really excited to kind of share with everyone and be like, oh, this is my childhood. And, you know, getting stuck in that level was just, yeah, it was not good. And especially with Sonic Adventure 2, that wasn't as bad, I have to say, except for one level. Yeah, going back, it's like it's not all sunshine and roses, which is a shame.
Well,
sorry.
I think as well, when it's a franchise, your brain gets a bit muddy, I think, with some of the stuff, because I went to play Pokemon Silver, just kind of a similar brand to you, and the things I remember, all the I was like, yeah, the bag's got 10 different slots for stuff, and you got Pokemon boxes and everything. Like, I was misremembering the game from the later generations, especially because Pokemon remade them, and so there's a lot of key features that you think exist but actually don't. And I bet, like, same as Sonic, where how they upgrade the mechanics as it goes on, same as Medal of Honor first-person shooter games, same what I mentioned Final Fantasy. As these games move on, you kind of forget about how bad the quality of life is, and how good people have, because these games keep getting tweaked. And I think in your own brain, you kind of, I don't know, you know what I'm getting at. You kind of you kind of misremember. Like I certainly remember Pokemon Yellow as having the boxes and having the bag with the 8 slot, you know what I mean, like all that kind of stuff, which it obviously does not have. But like your brain, you remember the good, like you say, you remember the good stuff. You don't remember the detail. So whatever game you played more recently, you probably remember that detail.
And it is, it's a shame. No, it's like kind of gutting. See, when you go back to a game, because I've done that before as well, you go back to a game and you play it, and you're like, where's this feature? And then like it slowly sets in as you're playing it, going, no, they didn't introduce that, like, you know, later on. And then you actually go back and look it up and you're like, yeah, they did. And you're like, oh, shit. Okay, fair enough. And it's like that kind of gutting, thinking that you're going to get, like, this, you know, this experience that you were promised, and then it just... Yeah. So, kind of following up from what we said, I've got, like, one major follow-up question, and again, I'm really interested to hear what you guys think. First of all, so going back to the games you chose, how have these games, like, shaped the way you game, like, nowadays? Like, is it a positive or a negative experience? And I was going to ask, do you still play these games? But I think we've kind of covered that most of us don't, unless we're streaming or trying to find, like, Windows 98.
One of these days.
One of these days. Yeah, one day. But yeah, sorry, who wants to go first?
Adam, how about you go first? Because I feel like I've been dominating the first.
Yeah. And we're switching up right at the end.
Yeah.
Throwing you off. Yeah.
Throwing a curveball right here.
Yeah. So, well, in terms of like Medal of Honor Frontline, I still play first person shooters and I still play history games. So that has definitely that kind of game has sparked me into trends that I still, the games that I still play and I still love. Two of my favorite genres. As I said with Legoland, I said never played another management simulation game again. But I think looking back at it, again, it was because it was kid friendly, and so it wasn't that involved. But the game did require you to think a little bit, and you had to kind of strategize a little bit about, well, okay, what kind of rides I want to put down, and okay, look after people's are people hungry? Do they want nice scenery to look at and things like that. So looking at that, I've kind of loosely termed it as almost like a kind of puzzle game in a way. And I really enjoy games now that have kind of puzzle elements in them and sort of games with strategy as well. So if I look at, I've perhaps never played another kind of management sim again, but I went on to play games in the Total War series, with kind of strategical elements. And then I really enjoyed games now like the Sexy Brutale and Return of the Obra Dinn, which are more kind of puzzle and kind of, detective games and require you to think and work things out. And I do think that I can trace that back to a game like Legoland that, engaged my brain and made me think about what, strategizing, what I wanted to do and kind of a bit of problem solving. So in that way, I may not have stayed with the exact genre of game, but it definitely broadened me out and for me to actually look for games that have these kind of puzzle elements. And I remember saying to you last week how much I really enjoyed the kind of side missions in the last Call of Duty game because they required you to think and work things out. So so almost a new Call of Duty game is the perfect synthesis of Legoland and Medal of Honor Frontline. There you go.
Yeah, try printing that on the cover of it.
I'm going to do after the sofa.
It's just like Lego.
Please leave a 5-star review on the Amazon page for it or something, just for that quote.
Oh my god, yes.
Legoland mixed with Medal of Honor.
But yeah, what about you, Craig?
Just going to say for a start, I regret going second there because that was a fantastic answer, Adam.
It really was.
Yeah, kind of following on from that. Kind of a similar thing where I picked up the genre rather than the franchises. Certainly, Final Fantasy 9, so that comes out straight after Final Fantasy 8 is on my. I did a list of games, like a top 15 for a game that me and my mates did during lockdown over. We tried to do a tournament, tried to determine the best ever game, and I put Final Fantasy 9 in my top 16 games of all time. And obviously, that's a direct sequel to this one. But even after that, if I looked at that list before coming on, just to kind of remember what I'd put on it, and so many of the games are these really story-heavy RPGs, and I think it's maybe a coincidence that so many of them are Japanese RPGs, simply because that's what most RPGs were for a long time. But I think now, for me personally, games have got better over the years because I really like cinematic story-heavy RPG-based games. So things like anything that involves lots of characters standing around talking is basically my ideal game. And the less time that I have to play it, the better. So, Last of Us was on my list. The new God of War game. We spoke about that recently on the podcast as well, and that's one of my favourite games. And I think all that can be traced back to Final Fantasy VIII, and just how that got me into that kind of heavy cinematic gaming. On the other hand, Guitar Hero, don't really play that genre game, so you don't really get rhythm games as much now. I did get Just Dance. So I got Just Dance on the Switch, which is an absolute workout and not as relaxing as playing Guitar Hero by any means.
Oh no, I can confirm that. Yeah, that's definitely not.
You don't look as a believer, I think.
Sorry, just on a side note for that, all the adverts show you families and wee kids dancing to that. I was like a sweaty mess, just panting on the floor, just kill me. It's pop, as this cheery pop song is on in the background. It's what sadist made this game?
Me and my wife, Footloose, and then the Backstreet Boys. I had to sit down and just sit with my head in my hands for a minute. And yeah, it's not quite as relaxing. But in terms of rhythm games, you don't really get. But I think kind of what Adam was saying about that opens the door, and I think for me, Guitar Hero, my love of Guitar Hero opens the door for me to maybe start not being such a dick about the games that I like. And kind of simpler games again. I think I'd kind of strayed off that path so far, and I think getting into Guitar Hero opened back up. And I also think that couch co-op is something that was missing for a long time in games, and I think it's coming back now thanks to the Switch, the indie developers. Who love that kind of stuff. And obviously this year's not been the greatest year for couch co-op. Yeah, it's been great to see that kind of getting rejuvenated. Guitar Hero, I think, getting two people in the room playing against each other and in co-op, which I think is something a lot of games miss out, is the cooperative element and the versus element. And just that Guitar Hero rekindled that love for me, and I think some of my fondest memories as we get a wee bit older, so maybe not so much childhood, but a bit after that, is things like playing Rock Band with like a big group of us. Many a night at uni was spent with that stuff. And that's probably my summary of the two games. Oh, and before I move on, shout out to the Sexy Brutal, because Adam mentioned it as well. It's fantastic.
You go play the Sexy Brutal, it was amazing.
Yeah, I remember being round like last year, just gonna preface it. I think it was round at yours, Adam, and yeah, I remember you playing it, and it did look really interesting.
It's such a clever game.
Yeah, it is one of those games that I looked at and thought, wow, this is a really good game. I can't wait to add it onto the backlog. And then just completely forget about it, because I sit there thinking, how have I not played this game? And then I look at the backlog and I'm like, oh yeah, because I don't play games. I suppose for me, I don't know, I feel almost as if, because so kind of I'll start kind of backwards, like starting from Sonic. Because of Sonic, I would say, I started like kind of exploring other platformer games. Like, as I said before, Banjo-Kazooie was like a really big one for me. But, and Mario as well, technically, to an extent, but I never thought it was as fun, if you know what I mean. Like, I felt almost as if, because a lot of these, and this was kind of a typical thing, like, especially for Pokemon, like, as soon as anything similar to Pokemon came out, like, everyone would be like, oh, it's a clone of this. Like, I suppose it's like what kids do, like, nowadays, if they see, you know, like, a Battle Royale game, and they'll go, oh, it's like Fortnite, or just, like, in general, really. But yeah, especially, like, with Pokemon and Digimon and all of that. And it almost, I don't know whether it was just really clever marketing, or it was just like how to put it, it was like they really knew how to get you kind of loyal to the game, if you know what I mean. So it was like, it was positive in the sense that I was trying to find games like it, but I don't think I actually ever came across a game that was similar to Pokemon, like an RPG game that I was really into, because like I think I veered like in the opposite path to you, Craig. I never really, like, other than Pokemon, I never really got into any JRPGs. And then years later I did try getting into, I think it was Xenoblade, like years and years later, and I couldn't get into it. It wasn't my kind of, and I know like that's probably like an exception, because I've still got Persona to try, which I'm really excited about. But in terms of like back then, it was, as I said before, it was kind of that comfort of being familiar with that franchise. So I suppose in that sense it was a bit negative, because I was trying to find a game that was kind of similar, but at the same time, you know, trying to find something different, kind of trying to evolve from that. But I had quite a weird relationship with games, because I got, and I don't know if you guys felt the same, but I got to a certain point where I like stopped playing certain games. So like when I started becoming a teenager, and basically see when my parents let me buy 15 and 18 games, it was like that kind of barrier was removed. And it was just like, yeah, I'm going to play all the Call of Duty. I think that was one of the first 15 games I got, actually. Call of Duty 3 or something. It was like one of those games. Either that, or it might have been that Bully game, the Rockstar one. That was a good one. But yeah, it was like, even though like I was 15, you know, and I was playing these games completely legally, it was completely fine, parents had their blessing and everything, it almost felt like, and I was saying this as well, like the other week, I remember I played, it was a Jak and Daxter series. That's another platformer, mind you. But I was playing that, and I think in the third game, there's like a scene where someone says like a really tame curse word, like damn or hell, or, you know, like something like that. And obviously nowadays it's kind of like, oh right, okay, fine. But see, back then, being like a kid, I remember like looking and going, oh my god, he said that word. And then, of course, there was one time where I was playing it and my parents, or not my parents, but my mum and my brother had walked in. And I'm like, oh, let's see what this new game is. And I was so, like, afraid of... I was, like, really afraid of, like, going into another cutscene where they might start, like, just cursing and swearing and things. And then they would have been like, oh, what's this game? So I just spent, like, the whole time they were there just driving around the desert area. until they were gone. And then as soon as they were gone, it's like, right, back to the story. Because I was just like that nervous. Oh, but yeah, there was that like point where eventually I kind of shed, or not shed, but there's like a really good comic for this. I don't know if you guys have seen it, and I can't remember if it's like Penny Arcade or one of these like gaming comics, like one of the really old ones, where it's a guy playing Pokemon when he's younger. He's playing it as a kid and it's like, everyone's going, oh, Pokemon. And then he gets to a teenager and everyone's like, you know, kind of very edgy and they're like, oh, Pokemon, oh, that's kiddie stuff. And then it cuts to the guy in college and they're all the same as the kids going, woo, Pokemon. And they're like really excited for it. And that is definitely, I would say that was my experience. Like, being really into it when I was a kid and then kind of moving away and going into more, you know, like shooter games and things, and then going like back into it at uni, kind of having that, you know, like that shared, not shared communication, but like that shared topic, if you know what I mean, because it kind of came full circle for me, because it's like, yeah, as I said, like Pokemon was that kind of gateway to like start talking to people. And then it was like Call of Duty when you were older, and then back to uni again. It was, you know, the question of, hey, do you remember that game Pokemon? And you kind of look at them and you go, maybe. It's like, you know, like a Cold War film or something where you're like, how much do they actually know? It's like they'll show you a picture of Magikarp and they'll be like, do you know who this is? And you're like, maybe. Begins with an M, and it's like, you know, fine well, you know, playing games. Ironically enough, playing games, but not playing the Pokemon game. And yeah, I think that is more or less us wrapped up. Is there any like other stories or anecdotes you guys want to share? Or are you good?
I had to laugh just when you were talking about like when your mum walked in and you were just when you were playing the Jack and Daxter game. It sparked a memory for me with one of the early Call of Duties where I had a similar thing. Where my dad walked in and when I was playing it, and I was really scared. I didn't want to shoot anybody because I didn't want to see any of the blood or anything. So I spent the whole level like running around just like clubbing death with my gun, which makes the game a lot more challenging, to be honest. I did this for about 15 minutes of just running around like a madman, just swinging my gun around.
Yeah, the pacifist run. well, semi.
No bullets.
Yeah, no bullets.
No bullets were harmed in the making of that level. Just part of that memory for me.
Yeah, that's amazing. What about you, Craig? Is there any like closing stories?
I don't think so. Like my parents were quite hands off with me in terms of games. Yeah. I'll clarify that for someone thinks I'm got daddy issues or something. No, probably the main ones for me hiding was like, it's actually nowadays that I live with my wife, and I like to play a lot of games from Japan, and unfortunately a lot of these games have questionable female characters. I'm a massive Soul Calibur and Tekken fan, and I just can't even be bothered explaining them anymore, and I'm just like, Japan. And then I'm about to start Metal Gear Solid 5, and I just know I'm going to have to explain why one of the characters breathes out of her skin, and I just can't bring myself to do it.
It all makes perfect sense when you explain that she's
in the lore.
Yeah, it's the lore.
Out of skin.
It's the rich, deep Kojima lore, you know.
But it gets worse. There's another layer to this. And I met my neighbours a while back, and one of them was saying, "Oh yeah. So you like wrestling, don't you?" And I was like, "What?" And I went, "Yeah. You know, I saw it was on your TV when I drove past your house the other day." And I was like,
"Oh no,
fuck!" Definitely not playing Metal Gear Solid 5 now with the curtains open. My God.
I'm just thinking there's your neighbours driving by, going, "What a thrill!"
But like, I've been playing so many games like Dragon Quest 11, like tons of like games in Japan. It's like I have all these women in it. I was like, oh man, I'm so ashamed right now.
Yeah.
So that's my trying to hide game story.
Yeah, and on that note, I think probably a good time to wrap up. First of all, thank you both so much for joining me today on this.
Thank you.
Always appreciated. So yeah, as always, stay safe, stay awesome, and most importantly, as always, stay hydrated. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.